Still Team Human with heart, empathy, and love. One. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Still Team Human. I am your host, Francesca DiMeglio, and this is where we discuss how to keep people at the center of our work, even in the age of AI and other advanced technologies. This is where we elevate the human and understand how people can ensure the new world fits around their best interests. And I'm very excited because today we're talking to Tom Siciliano, a friend of the podcast who recently launched TS Business Coaching, a practical training program for managers who were promoted without ever being taught the business fundamentals they need to lead at the next level. P&L, cash flow, budgets, hiring, managing up. You get the idea. And it is great to have you here, Tom. How are you doing today?
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited to be here. We're getting ready for a little snowfall here in Colorado on May 5th.
That
Crazy.
is wild. Yes, the purpose of this podcast is about being still team human with all this uncertainty, and snowfall on May 5th is certainly uncertain. That is
True.
wild. Very wild. Well, it's great to have you, and I thought we could get right to it. Tell us a little bit about this new venture and what prompted you to start it. Why is this the moment?
You know, what's interesting for me, so I've been in leadership for most of my career. I think I had my first leadership role, I think when I was 23, 24 years old. And I've always loved coaching and developing people. And so throughout my career, I've had the wonderful blessing of being able to give back and do the right things to help teach people. I've had some great mentors along the way. But one of the things that was truly interesting for me, and I think one of the moments that really kind of set this in motion for me, is I was around 32 ish or so. And, my career was going great. I had been promoted a number of times, but I wanted to go to that next level. And I remember I was asked about my understanding about the P&L and some of the business fundamentals, and I didn't know that stuff. And so I dropped out of college back before that because I'm dyslexic and it was hard for me to learn things. So I'm 32 years old. I got two kids. My wife and I are, we're doing all the things that are necessary to, raise our family, but I couldn't get to that next level. And so I went back to school, finished my degree, learned everything I possibly could about the business fundamentals. Because one of the things that's interesting for me is nobody teaches you actually how to read a P&L. Nobody teaches you what cash flow liquidity is. Nobody actually teaches you how to hire somebody. You can go through some interview guides, and there's a lot of AI stuff out there to do it, but nobody teaches you what do you do after they answer a question? What's the rebuttal? What's the follow up question? And so I really had this passion to help people. My career going on. So by the time I was 36, I was a senior vice president of sales, running a large organization. I went on to get promoted a number of times thereafter. I've been president and CEO 4 times for other companies. But then it was time for me to step down and retire as a CEO. And so I'm still fairly young. And I don't know that I can ever fully retire. I don't think people do that anymore. But anyway, so where I did is I came up with the idea of giving back. Learning and teaching is very important to me. And so I wanted to learn how to create a way to teach others. So, as a former CEO who always had people around me that did stuff for me, now I had to figure out how to create the website, how to set up a studio, how to put together a curriculum. And so it took me probably 6 months to record all the lessons that I have created. And so it was really fun. But the message here, I think, to maybe specifically answer your question, I was driven by the passion to help others because I didn't have those business fundamentals because nobody taught me that stuff. So that's why I really wanted to create this platform to teach others how do you get to the next level.
I think that's so interesting. First of all, anybody who knows me knows that I used to cover higher education regularly for Business Week and specifically the business schools. And they do teach you those things in the MBA. But what has been happening, as you, I'm sure, are very well aware, is people are questioning the return on investment of universities in general, of the higher degrees for certain, because it's just impossible to win back and earn back the money that you have to put into it. And then things are changing so quickly. It's very outdated, even, 6, 7, 8 months down the road, forget about years later. So there's a lot of talk in the universities about how to make it some sort of continuous education. And one of the things that the United States does very poorly is training workers and retraining them for things like this AI wave that's about to hit us all and stuff like that, especially when compared to other Western countries. So I think that any kind of effort to help people along the way is important to talk about. And another thing I wanted you to comment on is in covering HR. As you know, I covered HR for HR Exchange Network most recently. And in covering HR, we know that besides the fact that the training is, not always continuous and it's not always really in the best interest of the workers and all of that, it also requires a lot of effort on the part of the workers in many cases, and a lot of investment on the part of the employer. And it doesn't always work as effectively. How are you, trying to address those concerns in what you're doing?
Yeah, great question. And I would tell you that, so I've done a lot of research. Before I started to do this, I did a lot of research, and I didn't really want to price this to be way out of whack. So if you wanted to go back and somebody wanted to go back and get their MBA, well, you can drop 30, $40,000, just like this. But what's interesting about the MBAs, and hopefully this doesn't offend any of your listeners, but a lot of the MBAs are taught by professors that are theory only. They've never actually sat in the seat. So my perspective was, I'm going to teach this from a CEO perspective on what I would want from my employees. So the differential here is I've priced this fairly. And it's, we don't have to talk about pricing on all that stuff, but I've priced this fairly so people can use it and not have to break the bank. Also, it's taught from a perspective of a CEO who's actually done the work, not just theory. AI is a great idea here. AI will give you all this stuff, but they don't give you the stuff behind it, the detail behind. And so I think that's an important element here, as people are trying to figure out what's next.
Absolutely. Another thing we all know about anyone who's covered HR knows this for sure is that a lot of the time people leave jobs because of the managers. There is this disconnect, and we often promote people, as you say, because they've done great at their job, but not because they're leaders. So, how are you connecting those dots as well? Like, what are some of the lessons you're teaching or that you're covering in the curriculum to address that?
Well, so the curriculum is really boiled down into two key things: quantitative and qualitative. And within those, there are five major topics within each: qualitative and quantitative. So in qualitative, you might have, stuff like hiring and onboarding, how to run a meeting, how to influence change. And so quantitative, there's things like the financials and cash flow and all that stuff. But what's interesting about that is you need to make it in a way that people can understand how to do it. So the lessons that I've created, and there's 58 lessons in total, so people can go through this and they're at their own speed. So that was one of the key things, is that people are busy. We're all busy. And so you can go through this at your own speed. Once you sign up, you have instant access to everything for lifetime, and then you can also talk to me. But what's also interesting is that when people get to a title, and so I've created a YouTube channel as well, and so I'm recording things about things that are basic things that I think we all think about. And so, one of the last things I just got done recording is you can never rest when you get to that next position. So, oftentimes people get that title. I've got a manager behind my title, or I've got a director, I've got a VP, or whatever the title is. And we rest on that and we think that we're there. And you're constantly having to be learning and developing new skills. If you don't, you get past. The competitive nature in our marketplace today, I don't have to tell you, in an HR type of area, constantly people are fighting for that next job. And when somebody posts a job, there can be 1,000 people applying for that job. So, what makes you stand out? What makes you stand out amongst your peers? And so, when I teach this stuff, I'm teaching people how to constantly be evaluating yourself, not sucking up to the boss. I've got one of my favorite courses is about influencing. If you're influencing your boss to do something, there's a skill to that. And you've heard the term managing up, managing down, managing across. Well, how do you do that? So teaching some of that stuff is very important to me because when I see people struggling with that, there is a way to get past that so that you can achieve all the goals that you want in your career.
It's true. It also, I mean, life gets boring if you're not constantly challenging yourself and trying to improve yourself. And like you said, you will get left behind. I think at this
Mhm.
point in time, it's really imperative to understand how competitive things are. And in
Sure.
fact, I'd love to hear from you since this is still Team Human and we're talking about the future of work and all of that. What do you think is the biggest disruptor to the workforce right now and why?
Well, I think there's a number of things, but I think AI is a big thing that is going to be a disruptor. Now, there are a variety of different jobs that will not be affected by that, but there are an awful lot. And I don't care if you're in manufacturing, I don't care if you're in some type of a service related, because you can have bots that can answer a message. You can have manufacturing machinery that can do certain aspects. You've got some of the big companies laying off people. So that's one aspect. I think the other aspect, in my opinion, is that people in general, and I think I would be guilty of that when I was younger in my career, we feel like, hey, we work hard, we've earned it, we deserve it. And nobody gives us that stuff. We are hired talent. When we work for a company, we're like a free agent. We get signed up and we're a hired talent until somebody else comes along, using the sports metaphor. But I think the biggest fear that I see is AI, and but also us not realizing that we need to step up our game, that we constantly need training, we constantly need development. And that's, I got to tell you, Francesca, that's the thing that just, from a pure passion standpoint, drove me to want to do this.
Yeah.
Because I could have easily retired and just not do anything, but I wanted to give back because there's so much that you can learn, yet that will still help you from not getting obsoleted out, so to speak, if that's a word. When you're somebody else could do the job because they've learned it on AI, they've picked up something, they read an article, and now they look like an expert. Well, so
Mhm.
you can't be passed up. You've got to do that. So I would say AI and people not recognizing that you have to evolve, you have to keep up, you have to constantly be learning.
It's true. There are a lot of people, I'm middle-aged, and a lot of people my age are like, oh, do I really have to learn the AI? I'm already going along. Maybe this is all just a lot of hype. You have to learn the AI. There's no question about it. I can tell you right now, the bots are here. They're already here, and they can take your job. But more importantly than that, I think right now, at the level that the bots are, it's not the bots that are going to take your job. It's the person who learns how to use them better than you or
I agree.
actually use it. So that is vital. Couldn't agree more with you on that point. So if people are listening to us and they want to keep people at the center of their work, like we've been talking about here and like I've been saying in my blogs, what should their priority be right now? What should their focus be on to ensure that people remain the center of our work and we don't let the AI just take over willy-nilly, or we don't, risk also being left behind by this advancement in technology?
Well, it's interesting. So as kind of as a side note, I'm a sculptor, and so in my free time, I have a mallet and a chisel in my hand, and I'm sculpting out in my shop. And so I've enjoyed that. And so I was in my shop one day, and it just popped in my head, and I was sharpening one of my chisels. And so I recorded a video while I was sharpening my chisels, talking about you constantly need to keep your edge sharp.
Right.
And the metaphor for that is you're constantly learning and you're constantly keeping your edge sharpened. And so, sharpening a tool in my mind is like going back to take a course or reading a new book or having a conversation with a mentor or challenging yourself with whatever. But sharpening your skills every single day. So, when I'm carving, I have to sharpen a tool probably every 15, 20 minutes if I'm using it a lot. And that means I'm constantly sharpening. But we also need to be sharpening our skills every single day. So I use that as a metaphor because it was something that just popped into my head as I was doing things. And because if we're not learning and if we're not growing and if we're not sharpening our skills, then AI or people that are learning AI and are sharpening their skills, then we get left behind.
Right. This is a little bit off of what we've just been talking about, but with all of this coming and the fact that we are telling people you have to stay sharp, you have to stay trained, I think some of it can be overwhelming. Do you have any thoughts or advice on the wellness of our workers today? You know, what people should be doing to feel centered themselves, and still feel vital? You talked about how people don't want to retire anymore, and I have spoken before. My father recently passed away, but he worked till the day he died. And now my brother and my husband are continuing his business because we couldn't allow it to go away because it was so much a part of who he is. You know, how do you help people in this whole evolution that they have to go through? Because you do have to change. And I think whether we like it or not, some of these jobs, I know mine is, are going to change. Mine is already changing as a writer and editor. It's part of why I'm doing podcasts too now, you know. So how can people deal with that mental part of it, the part that we don't dwell on much when we have these conversations?
Well, I think that is something that gets missed very frequently because people get burnt out. And so, having led people, I have a passion to make sure people get treated fairly. You know, when you're the supervisor of a company, you got to make sure that you take care of your people. You give them breaks, you do the things that are necessary, you pay them fairly, you make a safe work environment. For the individual, we need to take time to rest.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that I find often, and it's sometimes a badge of honor. Hey, I worked, 15, 20 hours today. Well, good for you. But that's not sustainable. So we've got to rest. We've got to take care of our own situation. And I think, and when I look back in my career, I didn't give the necessary amount of time to my family that I should have. I should have been there more often. I should have been taking time to just enjoy the time. When we achieve success is sometimes can be very fleeting. And if we don't take the time to relax and recharge our battery, then we're destined to burn out. And once we start burning out, there's somebody else that will take your job. So we need to take the time to refresh, study, take some deep breaths, try to get 6 to 8 hours of sleep a night if you can. Um, and so I think those are key things. But I also think it's, about getting in community with others. And I think, finding a mentor is a great thing. I've had some wonderful mentors in my career that you just pick up the phone and you spend an hour just kind of talking. And, I think when you're talking to a mentor, probably no different than probably talking to a psychiatrist. The first 30 minutes is about bitching about everything. And then you really kind of get into the, stuff. Okay, this is what we need to work on. And the last thing I would say is to put things in categories. And so, whether you have a bookshelf and you just have one thing here and you put things into silos so that everything is not overwhelming you all at once. So I think that's an important aspect as well.
That's really great. How would you go about getting a mentor? I think a lot of people maybe feel very siloed or isolated in this new technologically advanced world. Some of the people I worked with were so young when COVID happened, they never really worked in an office full
Yeah.
time. And so, what are some things you could do to get a mentor if you'd like to find one?
Well, I think first thing is defining what a true mentor is. And it's somebody that is going to not tell you how great you are. You're not looking for people to, I mean, it's wonderful. You have people around you that tell you how great you are. It makes you feel warm. You need people that are going to tell you the real truth. And so finding somebody that you trust, that you can talk to and you can trust that they're going to be honest with you. Not that they're just going to tell you that you're doing great. Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. Mommy's here or daddy's here. That's not what you're looking for. So that's the first aspect. Second aspect is sometimes you find that person in the workplace that you're in currently. Oftentimes, and what I suggest to people is you find somebody outside your workplace so that they're not compromised, you're not compromised, and you feel safe. So that's why I created, a special place just for people to sign up just for coaching. And I've got a lot of people that just sign up for coaching because they don't necessarily need the courses, or maybe they've signed up for some of the courses, but they just want to get the coaching. They just want to be listened to. And so I think it's valuable to find somebody that will challenge you. It's valuable to find somebody that is better at certain things than you are. And so I think that those are key elements to do.
I think that's really great. I think all too often we do go for the easy route. And like you said,
Yeah.
the warm and fuzzy, because it's comforting, let's face it. And it's really hard. I was just watching a podcast earlier today about with Scott Galloway in Diary of a CEO. And he was
Mhm.
saying how people today just don't know how to deal with rejection. They don't know how to deal with personal rejection or even professional rejection. And some of that could be helped by having a mentor who's challenging you. And another thing I've learned in the last couple of weeks, I interviewed Jerry Wind. He's a professor and an author, and he wrote a book now about enhancing your creativity with AI rather than having AI replace your creativity. And he said we have to actually challenge the machines too. And he gives a
Mhm.
whole explanation in the book about how to do that, how to ask it follow-up questions, how to, debate it basically
Mhm.
to arrive at better outcomes, better ideas, better brainstorming, and all the rest. So I do think we need more challenging moments in our work in our life right now. Um, I wanted to ask you some of your personal stories, if you're willing to share, about either being a mentor or getting mentored. What would you say has been the highlight for you, or any moments that stood out that the mentorship really helped you?
I think it's I can think of several people that have been there for me, and they're good listeners. They rewind what you say. So when I'm having a conversation, if I'm interviewing somebody, it's always fun for me when I'm interviewing somebody because I'll have a list of basic things I want to talk about, but I usually let the person tell me where we're going. So they'll ask a question, and then there's an automatic follow up. Oh, really? So tell me more about that. Oh, wow. Can you give me an example of that? And so I don't have to be overly prepared. It's about communication. So I think some of the stuff that I've learned from some great mentors is how they listen and they redirect. They listen to what I'm hearing, and then they'll challenge me. There's two things that I think come to mind as I relate to that. There's the five whys. Have you ever heard that term?
Yes.
And so the five whys is, so why do you feel that way? Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think that failed for you? Why do you think that succeeded for you? It's people asking you questions and making you think. That has been truly valuable for me. And I use that and I have used that for years. The other thing that when I'm working with people as a mentor, I'm and people that have worked for me, if they were listening to this right now, they would all start laughing, um, and they would probably tell you lots of stories about me. But anyway, I always talk about with people is you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable,
Mm,
and so there is a real true acceptance to that you're never going to feel comfortable 100%. If you're feeling comfortable 100% in your current job, then you need to be looking over your shoulder because there's something that's going to change. Nothing ever stays static. And so, being comfortable, learning to be comfortable when you're uncomfortable, it's key. And so, if you're not going to accept that, then that's going to be a problem. So I challenge people about that. And
mm,
so, what are you uncomfortable about? Okay, you've got to accept it. You're going to be uncomfortable. Okay, what's next? And I think the other thing is um, when you're looking for a mentor, you want a mentor that's will allow you to talk back. Meaning, as a CEO, I when I hire employees, and for whether I'm hiring a vice president or whatever I'm hiring, I'm always telling the people that I'm hiring is, listen, you need to understand that I don't want a yes person. I don't want you to come into my office and tell me everything that's great. I want you to come into my office sometimes, ask for some time to see me, close the door, sit down, and say, Tom, you're screwing up and I need to
mm,
talk about it. I love that kind of stuff. So finding people around that will challenge you and that you can challenge them. You told me I should do this. I disagree with that. And then that's to me is the greatest stuff. Then there's a conversation. And what comes from that is there's a rise for both people. So that's what I would say. I love talking about this stuff, as you can probably tell.
Yes, I think it's so true, and we all have to like get over ourselves so that we can disagree. I talk about this a lot with women at work that, all too often we are afraid that we're going to make a mistake or we're not going to say something correctly, and we all have to get over that. And also this idea that, whether it's an authoritative figure in your life or whatever, you have to be able to say if something's not going right or if you think that something isn't working. You probably know better, especially in the day-to-day stuff, which is where the workers are having the most impact. I think that is very important. I'm curious to hear from you. Since you were a CEO and the last time you and I talked, that is what you were doing. And you've seen all these generations at work. It's a historic time because we have four generations at work at the same time right now. Um,
Mhm.
what would you say is the biggest challenge of getting the generations at work to work together? And then I'd also like to hear what is it that most people are not doing that CEOs wish we were doing? Most people at work are not doing.
you know, again, I just recorded this not that long ago about what does the CEO want to hear? A CEO wants to hear the honest truth. Um, and so I think there's a level of communication, there's a skill to communicating with people. And I think that has been lost. I
Mhm.
think the age of people texting, I think the age of people emailing you've lost the art of the one-on-one conversation. So I think that's a very key element. And what I mean by that is when you're having a conversation, there's dialogue back and forth and there's growth back and forth. And so uh, as a CEO, I want people that are going to tell me things. And so it's important that I think, from my perspective, and I talk to a lot of CEOs that are friends of mine or been peers of mine, or whatever. And so don't lead with the detail. Lead with this. Lead what's up top, and then give the detail. A CEO would tell you that. A lot of CEOs, myself included, we're C students. I'm dyslexic. I had learning disabilities, still do. And so, I had to find a way around that. And so I listen really intently. But if you start with the detail, you're going to lose me. And so a CEO or a person of leadership doesn't have to be a CEO, just a person of leadership, got a lot of things on their mind. And so start with the top thing and then work your way down.
Mm.
The second thing, every company that I've ever led, I've always had my senior people read a book. It's written by Ken Blanchard, who is one of the leaders in the marketplace. Ken endorsed my book years ago, and uh, and the book is The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. And it's a simple read. Everybody's probably heard about the 1 Minute Manager, but the One Manager Meets the Monkey is a great. It's a very you probably read it in a couple of days at the most.
Right.
But the simplest thing here is, as a CEO or as a person of leadership, somebody comes into your office and says, "I have a problem. We have a problem, whatever it is." And so they've taken that monkey and they put that on my shoulder. I don't want the monkey. I got plenty of monkeys on my shoulder. I don't need your monkey. So what the idea here is, wow, it sounds like you've got some issues here. What are you going to do about it? What's your plan? And I think there's an art to communication. People feel like they have to tell the boss there's a problem instead of telling the boss what the opportunity is. And so I think the skill of developing that and working in a place that you can trust people and having a conversation directly with your supervisor is the key element here, is just being open and honest and working on that skill of communication. I recorded a lesson about influencing change even when you're not the boss, because I think we all think that we can't influence anything because we don't have the title. That's a bunch of BS, because we all are the same cogs in the machine that is working. And so the last company I ran, we had 1,000 employees, and I can't say I knew the name of every single employee, but when I would walk around the warehouse, 3 or 4 times a day, it was, good morning or hola or whatever it was. And, you have a conversation because you're just a person. I play a role in the company. So my role was quarterback. Okay, big deal. But I need the guys in front to block for me. And so the guys and the ladies, apologize. We need to be all inclusive. But anyway, so I think that's a key element. I think the communication skills have been lost. And so working on that, and that's a great thing to do with your mentor, is to really have people talk to you, because that's the skill it's missing, I think.
I think you're right. I was actually just saying this the other day. I feel like we have to do that for our children now too, because I think especially they've been affected by COVID. We were in the house all the time. Like I said, some of the young people I worked with had never worked in an office full time, or at all, some of them. So that can be very different. And combined with that idea that I was saying about Scott Galloway, with this fear of rejection that we all have, and this idea that you have to go through life getting all the trophies and just getting the claps on the back. It makes it very hard to have those hard conversations, to confront these problems at work. And trust me, it'll end up screwing the company, not just you individually. And you don't want that to happen. So I think communication is of the utmost importance too. What are some things, I know you're leading these courses and everything. What are some things people can do to improve their communication and get over some of these fears about, either getting rejected or having a hard conversation with someone?
Well, I think one of the things I talked about a little bit earlier is get comfortable being uncomfortable. If
Yeah.
if if your audience learns nothing from what I'm saying today, is get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's okay. So you got to get over that. And if you're not going to feel comfortable, then you got to try something else. So
Mhm.
that's the one thing I would tell your audience is got to get that out of your head. Second thing is that titles don't mean as much as they may have in the past. So I don't care if you're third down, fourth down, 10th down from the boss. We're all working together. Companies rely on people more than ever. And so when I look at a P&L statement, P&L statement is got a whole bunch of numbers on there, right? And I could talk about financials, so don't let me go down that road. But the biggest expense item on a P&L is direct labor. That's your people. And so, so you are one of the people that makes things happen. And so working together is important. So the communication is you got to take a risk. You got to be willing to risk. You got to be willing to take that step out. I've always referenced that movie, the Last Crusaders, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the last one I think it was, where uh, Harrison Ford's got to take a step, and there doesn't look like there's anything. He's got to take a step out to a walkway, and he's just got to have the confidence to take the step where it doesn't look like he's going to fall into a canyon, but then there's a ledge there that he couldn't see. And so I think taking a risk, taking a chance, realizing that you're never going to be comfortable is
Mm.
key. And it's also exercising it. So exercising that tool, having a debate with your peers. You know, I love doing this where you do role playing. I force the people that have worked for me, not force, but I challenge them to do role plays. And you'll pit people against each other, not in a way to make anybody look bad, but, well, George, you said that was important. Betty, what do you think? Do you agree with that? And so I think it's working around that and challenging and looking for that opportunity to make a change. So.
Yeah. I think that's really great. So you brought up a good point that nowadays the titles don't matter as much. We've heard about some companies even doing away with them, or having different layouts in their office so that everybody's out in the open, and rather than people who are senior executives having closed spaces. What do you see for the future? How do you envision the workplace and the workers, 20, 30 years from now?
I think where I see this is workforces are going to be very flat.
Hmm.
And so the flat organization, there might be a team lead, but it's a collaboration workforce. People are working together as one aspect of the whole pie. And so instead of having the different, now you've seen plenty of organizational charts where you got the person up top and then you got all these different layers. I think that's going to become flat. And I think the flatter the organizations become, the more valuable every single person is going to be to that organization. Because one person goes down, whether they leave on a pregnancy leave, or they get hurt at work, or they have a loved one that they need to care for. People need to step out. Somebody needs to step in. So I think the flatness of the organizations is going to be something that's going to be really keen, but that means cross training. That means learning what the other person does. And so, one of the things that I think when I'm working with companies and with people is learning what is the other person's responsibility will help you when you're communicating what they need. And you understanding that means that when you're doing your job, how does that influence? What's the cause and effect to somebody else? So, I think that's going to be a key element going forward.
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea. Do you think we'll be in a workplace? Are we going to be working from home? Any ideas on what that's going to look like?
I think it's going to be a combination. There's so many different companies now that are, testing things.
Yeah.
You have the 4-day work week, but you're working 10 hours a day. So you have more time at home. I think that's a really good thing. And, with the cost of fuel right now, hopefully that changes at some point in time. But I think going into an office is not as important as it used to be. COVID taught us that we can still get stuff done.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a downside to that. And the downside is that when you're working from home, if you're a self-motivator, like I think we both are, you have to be able to turn it off. Because
Yeah.
when you do that, it's very easy for you to work more hours. You're still home, but you're working more hours. And so that could be the downside to it. So I think there's going to be a combination, but I do think there is going to be split shifts, hyper shifts. I think the days of, somebody has to do the job, they have to punch the card, they got to be in there for 8 hours or 10 hours, whatever the job is, and sit at the desk. Well, not necessarily. Maybe they can work, if they have different child care needs. Okay, you're going to work from 8 till 12, and then, Sally's going to come in from, 12 till 4. Okay, it works. So I think there's going to be some flexibility with that. And I think the other thing that's going to impact that is our workforce is diminishing. We don't have as many people to do jobs. So we got AI that's going to affect us, and we don't have as many people. So I think it's a working together, whether it's split shifts, it's hyper kind of different ways of doing it, or it's working from home completely. But having worked from home, you can work more hours because the
I did,
computer's still there. I can still sit there. I can
I
still
did
go
it.
on.
I did it all the time. Yeah, when I was
Yeah.
working for a company from home, I did it all the time. I also worked for the company, and because I was from home, I was like, oh, I'll do the Asia meetings with you. I'll do the Asia
Hmm.
events. And you could end up all night just working.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
you really do have to find a way, set a boundary about the time and also even the space you're in, you need to be closed off, go into a different room to do your work if possible. It's not
Hmm.
possible for everyone, but if it is, that is
Hmm.
a good trick that I found as well. And
Hmm.
do you see AI being a collaborator or just a tool for people? Do you see AI being like a coworker of yours or being, like your computer?
I think I can answer that both ways.
Yeah.
I see it as a coworker, and I see it as a helper. So there's a number of tools out there, and so I believe that I don't want just one tool. And so I use Claude, I use ChatGPT, I use Perplexity, I use Copilot. Um, and those are the four. I have some other ones that I use, but I'm constantly challenging them. And so, just like you do with your work, I'll get an answer from, say, Claude, and I'll feed that answer into, say, ChatGPT and say, "What do you think about this?" And so, I think there's some value to that because you still have to do the thinking yourself. And
Yes.
so I don't know how many times I've asked some information, and writing great prompts is so key. Writing great prompts, but then recognizing there's no human aspect to that. And so there's that emotional aspect of an answer, because people are still people, and we need to be able to have that emotional aspect. So you feed it in, and you get different perspectives back. That works for me. Um, and I think recognizing that it is a resource to help you. Now, the resource can make you more productive, but you're going to not challenge your brain as much. Just like my wife and I were having this conversation a while back, is, the art of looking at a map, an actual map that you've folded up and you put
That
into the glove
anymore?
part. Now nobody uses that. Nobody knows how to read a map, and so now it's all GPS. Or you go into whatever your thing is
Google
that you have on your
Maps.
phone. Yeah, and so you're reliant. And how many times has it happened to you that it takes you in the wrong direction? And
Yes.
so and so it's one of those things that I think is important, that we have to use it, but we can't make it total reliant on ourselves.
You cannot. I can tell you about I guess it's a while now. It was like 16 years ago, so it was early days of GPS and the GPS machine. We rented a car and arrived in Chicago and had to get to my cousin's wedding in Michigan, and it took us 2 hours in the wrong direction, and we ended up taking 4 hours to get there. We missed the rehearsal dinner, but we were fine for the wedding the next day. So you cannot rely on it. So,
No.
in fairness, not at all. So, would you say that you're optimistic about the future of work and the arrival of AI into our workspace? How do you characterize your feelings about this right now?
I think it's an exciting time. I do think it's an exciting time. It does help with productivity. And so I think the productivity aspect and just getting a quick answer instead of having to go through and doing a search. I think there's an art to it. I think I've learned a lot more about that since I've been doing it. How to write information, how to ask a question and then get the information up. But it's also not being reliant on one answer. and then pressure testing that. So I think it's an exciting time, but I also think it's a scary time because if we don't accept it, then we're going to get run over. And so you've got to acknowledge that it's the world has changed, and the world has changed. You think back before. There was a time when we didn't have cell phones. There was a time. There was a time when you didn't have a laptop, and if you did, the laptop was huge, and your cell phone was huge. Um, but we all had to change, and it's made us more productive. It's made us more, given us more of an opportunity. There was never video calls. There was the uh, back when that first started, Skype was the first thing that really came out, and it was really kind of grainy, and it wasn't really good and constantly cut out. And now we do Zoom calls and Teams calls and podcasts. So accepting it is, I think, the first key thing, and then acknowledging it. This is where it's going, and getting comfortable with it, and understanding that it's a tool that you can use.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the days when my family on Sundays would have to schedule time to talk with our relatives in Italy and call an operator to get through. And you couldn't always get through. And now every Sunday we talk to them on, WhatsApp or Zoom. So
Mhm.
times have changed, and we see them. So it's really wild. So any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience before we sign off?
I think the only thing I would say is, if you find somebody that can be your mentor, your coach, your support person, hold on to that person. I think I would also say is get comfortable being uncomfortable. I would also say sharpen your skills every single day. Find whether you look for somebody like me that's going to help you with courses. Find somebody else. If you don't like me, go find somebody else. But find somebody that will help you because that's going to be the key for us going forward.
So true. And before we do sign off, tell us
Mhm.
how we can find you. What's the best way for people to reach you and to get a hold of the content that you're sharing?
Sure. Very simple. The website is www tsbusinesscoaching.com. So TS for Tom Siciliano, that's me, tsbusinesscoaching.com. And if you want to explore some of the videos, and when you go onto the website, you'll see all the curriculum out there, and there's a way for you to set up an appointment for me, and we can have a conversation and just explore, and at no charge and all that good stuff. And then my YouTube channel is the at sign at TS Business Coaching. So, those are two different ways for you to reach out and learn a little bit more about what we're doing.
That's very exciting. It was a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Francesca, you're doing some great stuff. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you.